Namaste, beloveds. This is Baladev Das. I want to give a brief understanding from the holy books. The Srimad Bhagavatam, which I have brought up in some other videos, is the summum bonum, the complete and final expose by the great sage Srila Vyasadeva, who compiled the Vedas. 5,000 years ago, this illustrious and awakened, fully superconscious being, Srila Vyasadeva, who is known as a literary incarnation of God, wrote down the oral tradition of the Vedas in the Sanskrit language. This knowledge, this wisdom had been descended from the higher planes of existence, originally from the Supreme Absolute Truth. The Vedas have emanated. They are personalities, and yet they take the form now of books. But they are living, holy scripture. And this is not for one race of being. This is not for one religion. This is universal truth, and it is meant for all beings at all times. These are the blueprints for humanity, for the awakening of consciousness, for the budding and blossoming, full blossoming of the human potential. And we have a very great boon in that this Srimad Bhagavatam has been translated from its original Sanskrit text into languages throughout the world over the last several decades. And this commentary comes from a very pure source. There is a great tradition that the enlightened masters, be they men or women, of the ancient traditions of passing this knowledge through, have agreed that without any alteration, this divine wisdom should be passed through to the current day. And there are specific lines of what's called disciplic succession from one guru to the next in a living chain, by which this knowledge has come forth to us today. So Bhakti Vedanta Swami has translated and given purports, commentary to these divine verses. I'm going to read just 2 or 3 verses. So, completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavat Purana, which is another term for the Srimad Bhagavatam, because it is one of the Puranas, propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Being is established within the heart. Now that's a well-known verse. Let us take that and continue here. Srimad Bhagavatam is the narration of the form, the Svarup, of the Supreme Being manifest by his internal potency. And this potency is distinguished from the external potency, which has manifested the cosmic world, which is within our experience. Srila Vyasadeva, this great sage who compiled this literature, makes a clear distinction between the two potencies in this shloka. So between the internal potency and the external potency of the Supreme Being. This is important philosophy to understand, that God is not a limited being, but unlimited. And therefore there are internal reasons for his creation and external expressions of his creation. Srila Vyasadeva says herein that the manifested internal potency is real, the internal potency of God, whereas the external manifested energy in the form of material existence is only temporary and illusory, like the mirage in the desert. In the desert mirage there is no actual water. There is only the appearance of water. Real water is somewhere else. The manifested cosmic creation appears as reality, but reality, of which this is but a shadow, is in the spiritual world. Absolute truth is in the spiritual sky, not the material sky. In the material sky, everything is relative truth. That is to say, one truth depends on something else. The cosmic creation results from interaction of the three modes of nature: ignorance, passion, and goodness. And the temporary manifestations are so created as to present an illusion of reality to the bewildered mind of the conditioned soul, who appears in so many species of life, including the higher demigods like Brahma, Indra, Chandra, and so on, all the way to the lowest forms of life. In actuality, there is no reality in the manifested world. There appears to be reality, however, because of the true reality which exists in the spiritual world, where the personality of Godhead eternally exists with his transcendental paraphernalia and associates. So, jumping from that into another verse in another great text, the Brahma Samhita, perhaps this will tie some things together. When Bhagavan, the Supreme Being, mixed together the individual essential realities, he manifested unlimited numbers of material universes. After that, he personally entered into his hidden abode, the innermost region of each universe. At that time, all the living entities woke up from the sleeping condition in which they had passed the duration of the cosmic dissolution. So to continue this thought, along with the creation of the material existence, which comes from a source, right? And that source being the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Being who exists in the spiritual domain, the spiritual reality, far beyond this material existence, and yet fully integrated into this material existence. So one would say, well, this material existence is equal in every way to the spiritual existence. It's called inferior energy. The chief engineer of a complicated construction does not personally take part in the construction, but he knows every nook and corner because everything is done under his direction. He knows everything about the construction, both directly and indirectly. Similarly, the personality of Godhead, who is the supreme engineer of this cosmic creation, knows every nook and corner, although affairs are apparently being carried out by demigods. Beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant, no one is independent in the matter of material creation, for the hand of God is seen everywhere. All material elements as well as all spiritual sparks emanate from him only, and whatever is created in this material world is but the interaction of two energies, the material and the spiritual, which emanate from the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. A chemist can manufacture water in the chemical laboratory by mixing hydrogen and oxygen, but in reality the living entity works in the laboratory under the direction of the Supreme Being, and the materials with which he works are also supplied by that being. Therefore, the absolute truth is simultaneously one and different from the material creation. Nothing is absolutely equal with the absolute truth, but at the same time nothing is independent of the absolute truth. Herein it is stated that the Supreme Being inspired the secondary creator, Brahma, in order that Brahma could carry out his creative functions. So, the supreme intelligence behind all creations is the absolute Godhead, Sri Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Sri Krishna states that it is He only who superintends the creative energy, Prakriti, known as material nature, which constitutes the totality of matter. Therefore, Sri Vyasadeva does not worship Brahma, but the Supreme Being who guides Brahma in his creative activities. Its rays is eternal. Similarly, the living entities have an eternal relationship with Bhagavan, the Supreme Being, the transcendental Sun. Since the living entities are particles of the rays of Bhagavan, they are not temporary like material substance, and his spiritual qualities are also partially present in them. Therefore, by his intrinsic nature, the living entity is knowledge, the knower, the possessor of ego, the enjoyer, the thinker, and the doer. Sri Krishna is unlimited, omniscient, and omnipotent. The living entities who have been conditioned from time immemorial suffer the distress of material existence. They also attempt to enjoy, but ultimately there is a dissatisfaction because of not being in complete union with the divine. And therefore repeatedly they rotate in the cycle of birth and death, transmigration of the soul, reincarnation. This is all due to the laws of material nature, karma, which is all set up as a process for purification. However, when the living entities submit and remains under the control of their supreme protector and provider, Sri Krishna, who is the master of Maya, the master of the matrix, the master of illusion, then one will never fall under the control of such illusion or this Maya. So I think this is clear that as we continue to study these Vedic texts, we will come to a crystal clear comprehension that knowing about the nature of the supreme absolute truth in the individualized personal form of Sri Krishna, the all-attractive being who is the reservoir of pleasure for all living entities and all of existence, we will then truly find the satisfaction of our souls. So to clarify in some down-to-earth and practical words, the living entity is eternal, always existing, primordial, primeval, cannot be withered by the wind or burnt by fire. So the jiva, the eternal living being, is part and parcel of the Supreme Being, just as the ocean has droplets of water which are equal to it in quality, yet in quantity a droplet is never equal to the whole of the ocean. And so similarly, the Supreme Being creates unlimited living entities constantly, which are being put forth into the material energy, into the limitless material creation, for their enjoyment. However, the living entity does have a choice at the moment of conception to either enjoy eternally in divine service to the Supreme Being or to enjoy separately. This is called free will. One would say, well, how is this a choice? It's an inconceivable process, and God is all love, in essence, all love, and merciful and compassionate. And so the living entity is given complete freedom to do anything and everything according to their desires and fulfill them in limitless capacities throughout the creation. And when the living entity becomes frustrated with not finding complete inner fulfillment and inner satisfaction by not being in union with the Supreme Being, which is like, the relationship of a child to a mother. That living entity will then search out absolute truth, will then search out the meaning of existence, and Bhagavan, or the Supreme Being, that divine relationship will be rekindled. For the mercy of God is that I use that word He, because God is the Supreme Purusha, the Supreme Masculine component. However, Prakriti, or the Divine Feminine, is the counterpart. So Shakti is the counterpart to Shaktiman, the possessor of all potencies, and the energy is expressed as Shakti. So the Divine Feminine and Masculine are equally God, and yet when we refer to God, we tend to use the masculine term He. So that's just something to get used to and not be upset about. God is ultimately always balanced in the masculine, feminine, and the feminine, ultimately, the further you go in this philosophy, presides over the masculine in that it dictates the masculine, that Sri Krishna is always obsessed with his Shakti, and his Shakti has power over him. So this is the beautiful qualities of divinity, which we are all coming to know and to absorb ourselves in and through divine service. So this path of bhakti, the awakening of pure love, prema, in divine service to the Supreme Being, this is an eternal process for the eternal soul to awaken to its full capacity. We are glorious entities, and as small, minute fractions of God's splendor, we also have the power of 10,000 suns within us. So all glory to the Jiva, the Jivatma, the soul of God's creation, and to Super Soul, the presence of the Supreme Being within the heart of all living entities. These beautiful Vedas, in their perfection, are delivering divine wisdom so that we can understand this intricate philosophy, which is a science. Bhakti, devotion, is a science of ras, of transcendental mellows and flavors, which bring the soul into divine ecstasy in relationship to the Supreme Being. So let's all try to understand these things as we delve further, step by step, all very gradually. Thank you for your patience and your kind hearts. Namaste. Hare Krishna.